Hey everybody, welcome to the Dice Tower. It's at the table, but it's on the Dice Tower, so it's kind of the same thing. I'm Tom Vassell, your loquacious host.
Hi, and I'm Eric.
That is exactly what Eric wrote. I read that verbatim.
Yes. Our guest at the table today is the Senior Director of Operations at Van Ryder Games. She's also the designer of Zpocalypse and Tales of Barbaria, as well as expansions for Final Girl. She's also a prolific writer and holds a master's degree in education. She's here to school us in games. It's Julie Ahern. Hello, Julie.
Hi.
I am so excited to have you here. We're going to talk about all sorts of stuff, and you are going to yell at me for some of my questions, and I'm looking forward to that as well.
Wait,
but
what is going on? Why would she yell about your questions? That's my job.
There was some animosity. We'll get to it. Tom, anything you want to discuss before we get into our discussion topic?
Well, I would invite people to Dice Tower East, but it's sold out, and so that's next year. But Dice Tower Cruise tickets are still available, so you can come to that. And we'd love to have you. And if you're feeling cold, I've seen snow in parts of the country in the last few weeks. That's insanity. Come to a cruise in Florida. Also, Gen Con is not too far away. We're talking 7 weeks, 6 weeks. It's really short. And we're doing a Dice Tower Awards there live, run by Eric Summer. So come on out to that if you can. I think there's a few tickets left. You'll have a great time.
Yes, and you were just telling me, Tom, the Dice Tower van is going to be on site in Indianapolis, so you can check that out in person.
It will be, mostly because we'll be riding in it to get there. So this is, I haven't done a van trip cross country in a decade. It's going to be interesting.
Oh boy, that sounds fun. Can you just pick me up on the way by, or that's probably out of your way? Never mind.
Yeah, I think Connecticut is not quite on the way, but yeah. Anyway, that's all the boring stuff. Well, it's not really boring. It's actually pretty exciting, but we are here to talk to our guests, so.
We are. Julie, I'm really excited to talk to you. Let's get the geographical data down first. Where did you grow up? Where are you now?
I grew up in New England, mostly Massachusetts, and now I'm in Indianapolis. So, you know, Tom can, if he gets there early with the van and needs a hot meal when he arrives.
Oh, there you go.
I'll be here.
I believe she'd have said we could park it at her house. Done. Thank you.
All right. So growing up, what's your earliest memory of playing games that you can think of?
So, earliest memory of playing games, and I tried to think about some of this. I'm not sure. We were always playing. My parents, my grandparents, cards were always a big thing in our house. So I can remember being up in Maine and being in the pack and play outside, fresh air, you know, it's summertime, and holding on to, like, because this was early times, this was, you know, the 70s. So it was a wooden pack and play with the hard floor and everything. Nothing was, like, kid-friendly, really. But, like, holding on to the bars and yelling bloody murder because I knew everybody was having fun playing cards, and I was not getting to do it because it was nap time. So that wasn't necessarily my first time remembering playing games, but that is my earliest memory of games being present.
So you're complaining as a 3 or 4-year-old that you're not able to gamble? This is like the beginning of a degenerate
I was earlier. It was
childhood.
earlier than that, because you're saying 3 or 4-year-old. It's one of my earliest memories. Period. At 4.
Yes, because my earliest memories are like, I have like 1 from 3, 1 from 4, and that's it.
Yeah. It was what. But probably one of my earliest memories about playing games, which I've told before, but I was about 4, because I told my mother that I needed to fix Candyland so that it wouldn't be boring when my sister wanted to play it. My sister, who was a newborn and was not ready to play Candyland anyway.
Wow.
Because it was a terrible game. And my mother said, well, what do you have in mind? Why is it terrible? I said, because you don't have any choice. You just have to do what the card says. That's dumb.
I believe the word you used as a young child was agency. You said, I didn't have agency in this game.
Agency.
Right. At the time, I did not know that. But my mother said, well, what would you suggest? I said, I would like to draw 2 and get to pick one of the cards so that I have a choice. And she said, fine. And that's how we house ruled Candyland. And she also ruined me forever, because that was the first time that I dev'd a game. And then I just kept doing it.
Okay. I mean, other folks, when they try and fix Candyland, just stack the deck so that they know they're going to win.
Okay, Eric, not everyone comes from a house full of cheaters.
I didn't want to cheat. I wanted it to be a better quality of gameplay for my sister.
I want to go back to the gambling. What kind of card games were we playing? Was it like poker, or are you talking about Uno?
Yes. Anything with a standard 52 deck of cards. If it's a card game, somebody in my family knows how to play it, and everybody else has played it many, many times. We've run the gamut. And yes, gambling was involved. Today, the bid to get into a card game is a whopping 50 cents still in the summer when you're going, and it can get up to several tables worth of people, because it's not just my parents, but also all of their neighbors. And that's a fun Friday afternoon into evening at the lake house in Maine.
Must be nice to be able to have change. I haven't seen change in a long time.
Well, I feel like it just keeps circulating. It's like the same change from the 70s. It doesn't go away. We just all...
Yeah.
And honestly, to be fair, my father and his best friend, Ray, are the owners of all the change at this point. They win almost every week. So,
who takes gaming most seriously in your house?
Who's what?
Who was the most serious gamer? Like who took it or was everyone just jovial? But I mean, there's always one person who's a little more serious than everybody else about gaming.
Oh, my grandmother, my father's mother. So Lovey was always a shark.
Right.
She looked like the quintessence. Like, she had the sweetest voice. She was a telephone operator way back in the day, so she had that lovely hello voice that she would talk to everybody with. And she baked, and she always smelled like cookies, but she would massacre you in cards. She did not play around, so she was the serious one.
It's like that false sense of security drawing you into the sweet grandmotherly role, and then just destroys you
100%.
at cards.
The problem with this is, now that you've said this, the next person we interview is going to have to be like, well, I started gaming when I was 1. You've like undercut everyone. All right, I will accept this in this Candyland development.
But my parents weren't big on television. We got to do things. So reading books, going outside and exploring, and playing games, board games and card games was our entertainment. So I don't necessarily know if it was a choice. It was what was always available.
So we mentioned it at the top of the show. You studied education at school. What was your particular focus? What drove you to go that direction?
So I had an undergraduate degree in theater, We all know how lucrative that is.
Very. Z told me it's the best. That's why he's working for me now.
And I enjoyed it. I did. But I went to the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and I got a job at the Smithsonian's Children's Theater, which was lovely and fantastic and an amazing opportunity, but still not very lucrative. And there's a ceiling to that. Unless you are going to go into, try to go to LA and you have to be really dedicated. And I loved it for the time that I did it, but pretty quickly knew that it wasn't going to sustain everything I wanted to do. And I wanted to do something creative still, but I also liked working at the Children's Theater because it was teaching children. So we were coming up with theatrical productions for children that were also educating. And so to me, that was the most interesting part. So I started looking at education programs that would incorporate life experience as part of it, because I also didn't want to necessarily go back for another undergraduate degree to become a teacher. So the College of William & Mary does a program where you can get your master's and become certified in Virginia if you have been outside and have other world experience. So they will onboard you whatever other classes you need to take if you didn't have the right ones for undergrad, and then you have a master's. So that's what I applied for. There were only 14 of us in the entire program, and it was summer, fall, spring, summer, so that you had basically 1 year away from working, and then you were teaching the following year with a master's. So that was the program I went to.
Wow. Tom can commiserate in the world of education.
Well, no,
Yes,
Julie has much more education in this than me. I just got thrust into teaching. She prepped for it. Probably a better choice, I'm going to guess. But let me ask you that. So you're not in education now as much. I mean, you're in the board game world to some degree, but there is a huge overlap in teachers, education, and board gaming. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a lot of, like I said, creativity. If you're talking about in design or having them in the classroom, I'm not. In what way are you?
Well, no, just people gaming. I'm not talking about the design. I'm just saying that it seems like there's a lot of people who enjoy gaming who are also teachers. It seems to be one of the biggest groups, and I've always wondered why that is.
You end up doing a lot of it hopefully in your classroom, but it's a group activity. I don't know necessarily if there's a lot of extra money as a teacher, so maybe not heavy collectors, but when you play, it's a more cost-effective evening out. And as a teacher, again,
okay, I like that.
I went from theater to education. I'm never going to make the big bucks here.
And then the gaming. Yeah, you seem to be on a very slow trajectory that way to the big bucks, but
so it's cost-effective. It's social, which as a teacher, I feel like a lot of teachers enjoy socialization, or they wouldn't spend all day every day with a lot of other humans. And it's something where you have to learn rules and follow the rules to come to an outcome, and a lot of teaching is of that nature. So psychologically, I think you're just predisposed to that kind of mindset anyway. That's a theory. I have no idea, to be perfectly honest.
Also, teachers have a sense of play just from hanging out with their students.
I hope so. I really do hope so, that most of the teachers out there do.
If you don't, you probably should stop being a teacher, really.
Yeah, probably.
It's time to back out. So, Julie, you have designed curriculums on educational games and game structures and gone that direction. And this is where I get myself in trouble, because I wrote on our document of questions to ask. Now, I'm going to leave it the way I said it. Why is it so hard to make an educational game that's also a good game?
Yes, you did.
And you highlighted a word in that question and wanted to take issue with it. So please, go ahead.
I'm super
All right,
confused. I'm a
so-
neutral party in this so far, but I will pick one of you to be the winner.
All right, so the word was good, which is subjective. And I will qualify before I get into this that I understand that we are on a specific channel with a specific audience who is hopefully watching right now that have a definition of what good is. And while we may all quibble, myself included in this, on where that good lands, I think we all have an understanding of where our range of what makes a game good. So before I get into the why, I would like to realign the scale of good. With the understanding, starting with the understanding that both you, Eric and Tom, you're both parents. So from seeing you're both involved parents. So you have spent time with your children.
I'm not agreeing to anything here because I feel like I'm being set up. But okay.
You have exposed them to many amazing quality things in life that have enriched their lives, including board games. So you have had time with kids. And Tom, again, to a certain degree, also with education. So having to educate a larger public. However,
I knew there was a catch, Eric. I told you.
However, when you are teaching in a classroom, you are not just involving the kids who you have spent time developing interests in a specific thing. You are working with all kids. And when you're working with all kids, you're also working with their parents to hopefully help them enrich their educational experience at home. So you have to cast a broader net. So our definition of good here is a niche. Here, the Dice Tower and all of its viewers is a niche, and it's a small niche in a very large ocean of what is accounted for taste. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to judge in any way, shape, or form. I'm just going to say it's a very small piece of the pie. So, what games are universal? Come on.
I'm not falling into this trap.
You know which
Chess.
one?
Chess.
Checkers.
Nope. You know which one?
Chinese checkers. Go. Go's very universal.
Tag.
Hearts.
It is. Monopoly.
Churches.
Tag. What?
Very small rocks.
Monopoly.
Yeah.
And I know you both have feelings about Monopoly. And I've seen those feelings all over the internet and in person. We've had conversations about this. And I understand why people have feelings about this. And not just you. I saw, 2 days ago on Twitter, I saw a designer all excited because their kid had to do a board game project, and then all sad because it had to be a roll and move. And why can't we la 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 la? Okay, sure. But let's look at Monopoly specifically. It's been around since 1935. And if you want to think about landlords games, since 1902. So 88 to 121 years of being in the public eye, to a point that you have the McDonald's Monopoly game. You have the grocery store Monopoly game where you get, like, it is pervasive in our culture. You can go into any store, and if they carry games from Hallmark stores to anything, if they're carrying games, they have a version of Monopoly. So we may not care for it, but you cannot deny that it is pervasive in our culture. So why are games considered less good by our standard? Because those are the games that are already baseline familiar. So, when you're in a classroom, the goal of a game is to teach content. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
It's to teach content. The goal of a game is not to win the game. It's not to cooperatively defeat the thing. It's not to player versus player gain the most points. It's to teach content. It is to teach some level of socialization, hopefully, but also to teach whatever subject, social studies, math, science, that content, and apply knowledge in a way that hopefully isn't just reciting information and have maybe a higher level of application, but at its baseline, yes, to show that you understand the content. So when you're going to do that, you don't want to add degrees of difficulty. It's the same thing as like with textbooks, the frustration of textbooks that I have. A textbook for 5th grade should be at a 3rd grade reading level, with the exception of the vocabulary words that you're teaching, because you're supposed to be learning whatever the textbook is teaching, not reading and what the textbook is teaching.
Okay.
Which do you want? It's what are you prioritizing?
You can only teach one new concept at a time.
Correct. If you want kids to actually absorb what you want them to absorb, and they have to use context clues of reading and sounding out words, and then try to figure out what that sentence was, and then try to figure out what that sentence is trying to teach them, you're going to lose kids. So if you want to play a board game, and you also have to teach them the rules of the board game, and teach them how the board game is set up, and teach them, you're going to lose kids. You're going to lose the focus of what they're supposed to be doing. So that's why Monopoly. That's why. So you're saying I don't do as much. So yes, I work at Van Ryder Games now, and I spend most of my time working and designing fun games for all the fun reasons. And so I can delve into the a lot more of the making games for game's sake, which is very enjoyable to me. But I also work with, Hampton City Roads Public Schools in Virginia have contracted me to work on games, and they have a program that is top down from their administration, implementing a program that is games in every classroom and online, if you're, especially during, when everybody was doing classes from home, but they still have a program that is an online program for homeschool kids that incorporates games throughout the week as well as the content. And then Fridays is a whole day RPG that is testing and application of knowledge. So they are very serious about applying games into the curriculum. So they did this for all of middle school. They're now working on implementing it for elementary school. And do you know what the 3rd through 5th grade teachers wanted me to do?
Make the game harder.
Make flashcards for a Monopoly-like game for their classroom. That's what they wanted, because that's what's going to help their kids apply knowledge. And I have to, yes, I'm going to absolutely do that, because that's familiar for every kid in that classroom and for their parents at home who are going to be playing this with them because they're being offered it. But I'm going to, yes, try to also give them a little, like for example, I also was like, great, but if we're going to learn concepts of numbers and how numbers don't have to be just a fixed thing, 5 is 5, and you want to start learning about how to think about 5 in greater terms. Have you heard of mountain goats, where you roll 4 dice and then numbers are, you're adding and subtracting 4 different combinations to try to get, up the mountain for the goats, and you're trying to figure out your strategies for using that. That simple thing shows you how transitory numbers can be, but that's a huge thing that can open up math for a lot of kids. But I have to give a little just a little taste to get the greater picture. And I understand also that getting mountain goats into every single family's house, and all the way up to what Hegemony was one of the games that, to get from one to is hard and not going to happen overnight. So yeah. All
right, I'm not defending Eric here. In fact, Eric's wrong. I don't know about what he did wrong, but here's the thing. I guess I'm missing the thing about this. I don't think we need to teach kids super complicated games or whatever. But I think there's a lot of really terrible, unfun education games. I don't care about Monopoly. That just are are dreck and lazy design. I'm sorry, they're lazy design by these people who will throw anything together. And you talk to people, and these people go, you say educational game, and they think it's bad. They have bad memories of playing these games. That's what I'm talking about when I say it, not Eric. Eric's clearly wrong. But I'm saying that I think a game can have one simple concept. For example, Apples Apples. Apples Apples works really, really well. It's one simple concept. It's a great game for kids to play. And you can do variations on that to do education. But I think that the Ungame, for example, is a terrible game where you move around a track and then talk about your feelings. We don't, A, need a game to do that, and B, there's a lot of problems with it. I give Monopoly a 5, which is not as bad as most people do. But I think Monopoly itself is a terrible game in a sense to teach kids if you know, you mentioned that it has that background in of itself, but if you don't have the background, there's a ton of rules in Monopoly. It's a very rules-heavy game compared to, say,
it is.
Sorry.
Again, sorry, Monopoly. But Monopoly, because of its pervasive nature, somebody in your classroom knows how to play it, and typically multiple somebodies. So
yeah, but my goal is to stop that nonsense. I look at those kids and be like, you learned the wrong game. Don't teach your kids this. Let's shut it down now. I'm not going to encourage his nonsense in the classroom. Yeah. Look, I know what you're saying.
Your curriculum, Tom, is different from Julie's curriculum.
I'm saying,
you have a different focus.
I understand what Julie's saying, and we should not be snobs. I definitely understand that. But I think it's okay to say there are bad educational games, and I will die on that mountain, that when I get an educational catalog, and I've gotten them, the vast majority of those games should be burned. And the people who do them, and I feel this way about a lot of things. I'm a Christian, and if I go to a Christian convention, people there just sell trash. They can put the word Christian on it, and people buy it. And I despise that sort of nonsense.
And I think we've had this conversation because, again, the goal of most
Eric started it.
Christian games... What?
Eric started this. I just want to be clear to the audience.
That Christian games, the focus of most of them is to either, for kids who are... to learn what they're supposed to be learning for, or indoctrination. Like, it's not about the adventure of of the fantastical things that happen in the Bible. It's about, do you know the 12 commandments? Do you know, like, it's not the same focus. That's what the purpose of it is. And so, yes, they tend to just be flashcards, glorified flashcards. I understand. And I have designed many a glorified flashcard game because I need the kids to learn that content. And I can assure you, it's still in game form better than, here's a stack of flashcards, start memorizing.
As a side note, I think flashcards, I don't know, for me, they work really well. I'm a big fan of flashcards. I really do. Like, that's, anyway, I don't think enough people learn
I also designed a game
memorization.
I think my favorite game that I have made was the Oregon Trail RPG, where each table in the classroom was a different wagon. And so I would read them information about the Oregon Trail, and then they would get a series of problems that they had to solve. And then there were dice rolls to mitigate which they were mitigated by their choice making of how to get across a river. What happens if you do run out of food? Like, all of these, along with the historical facts about it, and the more they applied that knowledge, the better they could mitigate their dice rolls. So the better off they did in the story. And we had 2 weeks of them being on the trail, and then out at recess, being in these little packs, and other teachers are like, what is happening? What are they talking about? I don't trust this. I was like, oh no, they're just negotiating horse use. Because we're at the mountains.
I don't want to say anything, but that game you designed with children is better than the actual Oregon Trail games that were published.
Well, but people remember it fondly. I know that, like, you're saying that, and it is.
No, I'm talking about the actual card game, that the Oregon Trail card game.
Yeah.
Your game is better than their game. No, the Oregon Trail Classic, I get that.
Oh no, my game was because they were vested. There'd be like this hardcore, like, okay, I will give you our stove, our kettles, like our stove that we brought, that's too heavy. That's the whole reason you can't get up the mountain. I don't want that. That's useless. Do you have grain? And there's these conversations happening on the playground, and the other teachers are going, what is happening? It's like social studies. I don't like learning. But it would be great. And that was, but can I give that to every single teacher in every single classroom? How much does that cost? How much time and effort to implement that?
That's why I think game education should be a teaching course required at all universities in the world.
Okay.
No.
One pitfall on the other side of the spectrum, when talking about if I can boil this down, you're talking about the whole reason that a game is relatively simple in an educational context is so that the emphasis is on the curriculum, what needs to be taught. I have also seen games come across the desk that are so focused on the curriculum that it becomes more complex as a game. There was a music theory card game that was so focused on the ins and outs of that music theory and all of the exceptions and the chord progressions and the theory that it became almost unplayable as a game because it was so complex as a rule set of games.
Right. And that is the hard part, because teachers tend to be very good at design in the concept of you have to make lesson plans so frequently that creating a concept, implementing a concept is pretty easy. You are not necessarily asking for the feedback of your play testers, also known as your students, to necessarily fine tune that as often is what the challenge is sometimes, I find. Whereas I was always welcome to feedback. Sometimes I had to be welcome only superficially so that I didn't, lose it on children. But, but yes, because their feedback wasn't subtle.
That's true. If you want honest, unvarnished feedback, kids are the best.
They are. So, I got really good before getting feedback from adults who are like, well, this is dumb. I got plenty of it from students, so I could say, oh, thank you so much. I will write that down. And sometimes you implement it and sometimes you don't. That is something that kids are quite good at, is expressing their thoughts and feelings.
But I think that's one of the benefits of doing stuff like this. So you mentioned the Oregon Trail thing. I like the idea of using a large group classes. I ran elections in my class every year where each kid had a candidate. The groups of kids had candidates, and then they would try to get electoral votes. It was teaching electoral system to the kids. But different decisions they made as a group. And I took such joy when you would see the kids at lunch arguing over something. And I believe fun ties into memory, which is why Julie has so many early memories of her life, because of the fun. But fun ties into memories, also trauma, but probably fun is better. Fun in the memories of, and you remember things better that way. That's why I like to use fun games that teach things.
Yeah. And to your point, there are ways of doing that, but also, so you're talking about teachers, whether it's, I don't think that they're actually being lazy. I think teachers are asked so much.
I don't think teachers are being lazy. I think the game designers who foist this stuff off on teachers are lazy.
That's fair. But you're being asked to do so many things and then implement, because as a teacher, you're now also having to teach how to play these games, which obviously I loved doing and had no problems doing. But that doesn't mean that's every teacher out there's cup of tea. And having worked with the program now where they're implementing it across an entire district, seeing that level of who's excited and who's clearly checking the box because they are required to now is apparent. And so how do you make sure that those teachers are still, why is this beneficial for them in the long run in their classroom? And that's why I think
it's exciting to see companies who are trying to bridge that gap and make lesson plans that teachers can use, give the teachers the tools that they need. And I was being a little silly when I said that teachers should have a game class in university, but I do think there should be education for teachers, because all teachers are required to consistently be, what do you call that? Continuing education certificates.
Yep.
Certified, yeah.
Yeah, and you need to do that. And I think part of that should be in there, because learning should not be a drudgery. We're learning more about education as years go by. Like, for example, there's a big swing about homework these days, and how useful is homework, blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to get into all that necessarily, but I'm saying we're learning and education's getting better. And there's definitely something to be said, I think, for fun being part of that. And yeah, teachers aren't gamers, but why can that not be something that they can get a skill in earlier on? Not necessarily teach an old dog new tricks, like, Mrs. Hazelworth, you've been doing this for 40 years. I want you to play Risk with your kids. Which, by the way, is called War in Brazil. I did not know this. Sorry. That was a very left turn there. But
I mean, it makes sense for us. It's circling back, but we were having a conversation before.
We were.
For everybody else.
Oh, yeah, I came back from Brazil, everybody. But yeah, that just makes sense. But, so I was in Brazil and looking at that. So war is their monopoly. Lots of people were wearing shirts, and I had it translated for me. That basically said, yes, I like to play board games. No, it's not like war. That's their thing. In America, the shirts say, no, it's not like Monopoly. I didn't bring up Monopoly. That was Julie throwing that bomb into this mix. But I just feel so strongly about this. I wish maybe I should be more proactive, like in contact schools and go in and do. I don't know. I really love the idea of games and education together. I just wasn't as provocative as Eric and used the word good.
Do I.
Well, all right. Let's put a pin in that and get to a question that came up in the Board Game Geek Guild about one of the lines that Van Ryder Games has been pretty successful with is the graphic novel adventures. And what Julian asks is, have you, Julie, considered writing a graphic novel adventure yourself as a prolific writer?
I mean, yes, but
is that something you would enjoy, I guess?
Oh, yes. So I do a lot of my writing is already set up to be similar to that. So working on Folklore: The Affliction, for example, it's a narrative driven, more of a role-playing game, but without a GM. So basically, as a writer, you had to be the GM. So you are making a very bulked up, choose your own adventure, but type of story. So a graphic novel has a very similar types of, or especially the GNAs, where there's different paths that you're going to go on, and it's all, within the context of the, actually, for anybody who hasn't seen one, here you go. Where you're going to have different points that are either in the text box or somewhere on the picture that tell you what number to go to, and you're jumping around an adventure. They have different goals. So there's the Sherlock Holmes mystery ones, which are, solve the mystery. So you're looking at the different pictures for clues, versus some of them that are less about solving a mystery and trying to, like Lugaroo is, you've been bitten by a werewolf, so are you getting trained by werewolves? Are you trying to find a way to get back to being human?
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and,
I like that one.
Each of them has like scoreable things that you can do that so it's not necessarily the end and it cuts it off short sometimes, but mostly it's you get to the end of the adventure and how did you do with the adventure and how did you score. I love these books, and I actually this one's one of the GNA juniors, so one of the newer ones for younger ages. And
is that one of the combo books, or is that by itself?
It's by itself. This is a standalone. So there's the combo ones where there's up to 4 players who can play and be the different characters on the page. So each of the books is slightly different based on the character you're playing. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the panels are the same, but some of them might have more information or less depending on them. Those are taking it even to another level because you have to write the same story with 4 parallels. And I have not written one but I have now edited several of them because we do translations, and then not all the puzzles and everything are an exact fit for when you translate it from French, turns out. And so then I've gotten to dev and tweak a lot of the puzzles and make sure that everything makes sense. And that piece of it I have done. But what I have also done is, Stefan from Blue Orange does the localization. So is our partner so that we can do the localization here. And last year at Essen, the Blue Orange party was one of the evenings, and it was definitely this very big networking event, and everybody there was trying to talk to everybody else about, I'm sure, very important business decisions. And Stefan and I sat in a corner for 3 hours and talked about the importance of children's literacy, which is why he is so passionate about this book series, and part of the reason why I love it, to bring it back to schools. We sat literally for 2 hours, and they finally were like, we got to close this down. You got to go. So there are the ones that do the parallels. There's also the GNA Junior books are leveled. So there's several different tracks at the beginning that show you how to play if you have a young person who can't read yet, a young person who's a beginning reader, and then an advanced one, so that if you're a parent, you're not losing your mind going over this book over and over. There's degrees, and I think that stuff like that is just fantastic.
When did these come out? This kid series?
These are brand new, or not brand new. It was the beginning of this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those look really. Again, I love these series, especially right now. It seems like there's a very high surge in America youth. They love graphic novels, whether they're graphic novels or they're the manga stuff from Japan. The
anime and manga, yes.
They really like that. Like, my kids love those.
Well, think about it. You loved picture books as a kid, and then
yes,
suddenly everybody's like, you graduated, and as a graduation gift, no more art. Of course you're gonna like graphic novels. Like, why would anybody love graphic novels? In my classroom, it was never, as long as it was age appropriate, I was fine with whatever graphic novel. And I still feel like this is adding another level of, yes, it's a graphic novel, but it's also gamified. So if you are a more competitive person, even though it's just challenging yourself, is that one more way to pull a kid in to get them to read? Absolutely. Why wouldn't we want that in the classroom? In my mind, something like sure, not for everybody, also fine. But yeah, I think they're great. They were my first. So Van Ryder, before this, I worked with Greenbrier Games, and we started at about the same time. And I remember the first graphic novel set coming out here in the U.S. and being so enamored with it, because that's, to me, I love reading, and it's like it was the perfect blend of reading and gaming. And I can't always get to games with a ton of people because I'm sitting here at home working all the time, and I can still feel like I played a game. And so, like, at the end of the day, half the time my book is a GNA. So yeah,
man, right. Yeah, these are great. If you've never seen them, folks, you definitely, and they're all ages and all genres. There's probably one that you would like. Like, I tilt towards more of the adventure ones probably than the Sherlock Holmes, but some people like Sherlock Holmes better, like that. It's more of a deductive reasoning one. My favorites are the combo ones, because you work together with two different books. But again, sometimes you're by yourself, having fun.
So our next one for that is 2070 is coming out soon, is the combo one. So it's 4 different, so it's a futuristic, you work for an agency, and one of the characters is an alien, one's a cyborg, and then 2 humans. And it's a fun one. That was my first. So, transitioning from fan to dev on that particular project, I have an insane spreadsheet tracking all 4 of them so that I could track, and so I know I have something that has every outcome and where it goes and who's connected to what, and it was like the spreadsheet equivalent of like the string board. And I was like, okay, I've now edited. I made sure that everything links to everything. And AJ's like, well, I'm going to take a look at it. I'm like, okay, but here's my homework, basic. Here are my receipts of what he was like, oh, wow.
So now, having done that, if you look at, say, a Choose Your Own Adventure book, can you see behind the curtain and see the code behind it?
Well, that's, like I said, I've written so many similar types of things that's just, I don't think I could write, like, I'm never going to write the great American novel. I can't write linearly anymore. All I can do is, here's a moment. Here's 7 variations of that moment. I can do that like nobody's business. But can I write one long linear thought? I don't know if I could do it anymore. I've been writing in games for too long. Is what it is.
All right.
That gives me... Okay, anyhow, it's time to talk about games. We haven't talked about games, but let's talk about specific games. So, lately, Julie, is there any game that you'd like to talk about that you've been enjoying? Oh, I didn't even look at your list, and that would explain why you mentioned that game earlier. Okay.
Yes. I played Hegemony, and I played Earth most recently.
Both should be used in the classroom. I'm kidding. Sorry.
Speaking of levels of degree of difficulty, again, several layers of education, but also
Hegemony, you need a master's degree to be able to play that one. That's a tough game.
I have a master's degree, and it was a brain burner. Loved them both. Of all the, well, all right. So now that we're back on the scale of being in Dice Tower World.
I don't think
Earth
we're on that, but
is on the mid level. It was, once the first time I played it was actually at Dice Tower West, and none of us had played it, and we all just started reading the book, and somebody eventually got over to us to answer questions, but by the time that had happened, we had already kind of gotten it up and running. So the learning curve was a little steep to start, but as soon as we started, the graphic design of that is so clean. All of the action selection. So I would compare it to Wingspan in degree of difficulty once you start playing. But I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was very clean. I thought the design was clean. I obviously really like the theme of the, trying to build the different biomes and everything like that. And then I was able to turn around and teach it immediately. So for me, that's a huge win for games. So I've now played it several times. I liked it.
That one's doing very well right now. I just saw the UK Games Expo. There was like hour plus lines waiting to buy that game.
Whoa, waiting to buy it?
Yeah, it was very popular there.
Well, I hope it continues to do very well for them. I thought it was great, and again, in that that you feel like there's meat on it. It's going to take about an hour and a half to 2 hours to play, maybe a little bit longer your first time, but it's still so much like Wingspan. If you're an established gamer, it's not going to be so hard that you're going to be able to go back to it over and over again and not feel like burnt out after playing it. Hegemony, on the other hand, while I loved it, was far more challenging of a game to play. And
what faction did you play?
Oh, I was the working class, and Robert was the capitalists. Derek Johnson, who plays a lot on Heavy Cardboard, was the state, and David Sartzi was the middle class.
Well, that's good. Middle class is the hardest one to play.
Which one?
The middle class is the hardest one to play in that game.
He did not win, and he was David Sartzi did not win, and he was not pleased about that.
Well, I'm sad.
Very competitive, he was, shockingly. And I had a great time. There was no way I was winning. There was absolutely no way I was winning the first time playing. But I could see the symbiotic relationship of each of the very unique classes. And I really wanted to play it again. I couldn't turn it around again, play it again immediately. But we have it now. The other thing being, I know that there are the AI cards to play with less number of people, but really, ideally, you want the 4 different factions.
I played it with 2 the first time I played it because I was just trying to learn the game, and that's the working class against the capitalist, capitalist. That's not bad, but you feel like you're missing part of the picture. You feel like there's stuff going on. It's best with all 4, but it is a beast of a game. It is fantastic, and it works like oil. But the players playing it, it feels like you're just running the whole game to keep up.
Yes, but it was. Yes, but I kept thinking about it afterwards. It was one of those ones where I was like, and I knew I wasn't going to win because, and I'm not going to get into too much because, again, everybody, you're going to have to play it for yourselves. But as the working class, you're leaning into the whole striking and trying to, during the voting period, stack the ballot to get your issues through. And so, yes, I threw a bomb into the entire thing. I was unhappy with the working class conditions. Everybody had lowered the wages of my people, which all I can do is assign people to the different factories, and everybody was lowering to the minimum wage so that I wasn't going to get more money. So I held a strike, and you're supposed to only be able to do it at one particular company, but I had multiple cards and I played them all at once, and I basically froze.
Nationwide strikes.
I did a nationwide strike. I froze the entire production line for an entire round, and there's only 4 rounds. And
oh wow,
that threw a wrench in the entire gameplay. And it's Robert, having played it and seen it played multiple times, had never seen anybody do it, and egged me on, knowing that I have the temperament to do that, and he had wanted to see it happen. So he made sure it did. So it was satisfying, but it also meant that I was never going to win the game. It's very interesting. I highly recommend everybody play it.
Okay.
But try to get a 4-player game going, and also be prepared.
Also realize it's also, yeah. Well, it's also the teach per player. That's the thing too. Everyone plays very differently. It's like Root in that way.
Yeah.
All right. What about you, Eric?
So speaking of teaching games, I have a co-op game called Miller Zoo to talk about. This is based on a real zoo up in Canada, and it's a cooperative game where you're trying to basically do crisis management. You have a bunch of animals, and you're trying to get them into their proper habitats. And every round, there will be needs, like this animal needs to be played with, and this one's cage needs to be fixed, or something like that. And you have to play cards to mitigate those crises, while also collecting symbols to bring new animals into the zoo. And it starts out very, very simple. And almost too easy, but then you open up envelopes and it layer more rules on top. It's similar to the Harry Potter deck building game, where you start out super simple, almost too simple, and then eventually unlock more mechanics and system special abilities and all that stuff, which is great for learning the game. But if you're already an experienced gamer in this Dice Tower sphere, as Julie calls it, you almost need to jump ahead a little bit. And so I found it too simple until you've opened up a few envelopes, and then it becomes much more interesting with the special abilities, and you feel clever trying to manipulate the mechanisms in cool ways. So it's only an until you open up a few of those envelopes, and then it becomes far more interesting as a cooperative game.
I disagree, because Julie taught me that simple games are good, no, I'm serious actually though. This one works really well with young kids, and learning. I think the envelopes is kind of a red herring almost. I don't know that you should have that with kids. I mean, it's exciting to open envelopes and stuff, but maybe it'd be better if you just said, here's more rules. I don't know. There's also, the game does one thing I really dislike that some games do, especially with in this game, which is a kids game, is you open an envelope and they're like, "Hey, 2 of the characters get special powers," and the kids are like,
2.
"I'm not playing those characters." Like, well, too bad, you know. And that's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Zombie
You don't get to.
Teen Evolution did that also. I think Zombie Kids might have done that too, where they're like, "Here's a special power for one of the kids," and you're like, "Well, great, but what about the other one?" I don't know. If you're gonna do something like that, give it to everybody. But it is a nice, fun game, Eric. I do like it.
Yep. I was going to talk about one other older game, but in our discussion, I want to talk about a book instead, and it's called The Monopolists. It's by Mary Pilon, and it is the history of Monopoly. And while I knew the overarching, the big beats of how Darrow didn't actually design it, and it was actually Lizzie McGee, and I knew the general beats, but I didn't know how convoluted that history was, and I think it's really fascinating. This author, Mary Pilon, goes back and gets the receipts and documents and affidavits and basically tracks from the original Landlord's game to it being basically a public domain thing, and then Darrow sort of going, yeah, I just want to teach the rules to other people, and then selling it to Parker Brothers. It's really, really interesting stuff. I am listening to it in audiobook, and I'm not a huge fan of the narrator, but maybe that's my problem. But the book is really fascinating. It's called The Monopolists.
This is like written very... It's not written like a documentary. I'm looking at a couple sample pages here. It's written very much almost like a novel.
It's a narrative for sure, yeah.
I might get this. It's on Kindle. Okay. All right, cool.
What have you been playing, Tom?
All right, let me show you this game here, Lacuna.
Matata.
This is... No, I knew you would say that. That's pretty pathetic. Boo to you for falling into that dumb trap. So this is a 2-player game, and the board is a big handkerchief type thing. And you pour all these flowers onto the board. If you can see here, you can see the lid has a hole in it. So you pour it out like salt all over the board. And then you have these metal pieces, and on your turn, you place a metal piece between 2 flowers of the same color, as long as there's nothing else in between them. So if there's 2 red flowers on the board, I put a metal piece between those 2 red flowers. I then get those 2 red flowers. So we each do that. I think we each have 7 pieces. You place these pieces out, you take the flowers. Then all the rest of the pieces on the board go to whichever piece they are closest to. And then there's 7 of each flower, and whoever has more of each flower wins that flower, and whoever wins 4 of the 7 flowers wins. There's 49 pieces. It's very interesting. I think you have 6 pieces each. So you're going to take 24 flowers off the board, but that leaves 25 other flowers. As you place a piece down, you're thinking, I want to take these 2 pieces of the color, but you're also trying to position it. You can put it anywhere between those 2 flowers, close to a bunch of other flowers, but you're also trying to win specific colors.
I'm assuming you can't cross metal rods then?
That's correct. You can't cross. If there's a metal rod,
so
you block someone else's.
You're also doing it strategically to cut off people from making certain choices, probably.
Don't cross the streams.
Yes, that's too Eric. Stop bringing popular things into this. It's about flowers. But anyway, it's very well done. I like it a lot. It's such simple rules, but your placement of the pieces is pretty clever, actually. So that's Lacuna. And then the other game...
Production value on it, it looks gorgeous.
It is. It's made by CMYK. They have done... they've done something else. I don't know why I'm... Oh, Wavelength. That's the thing they're most well known for.
Yeah.
Got that.
And they Monikers. Those are the 2 games that they've done. I don't love this container. I get why they did it. They wanted to have a container that holds everything, and also you can pour the pieces out. I just don't like these round containers. Also, if this is sitting on your shelf, it's pretty, but no one's going to think it's a board game.
It looks like a candle.
It looks like a container for incense sticks. Or a candle.
Or booze. Some nice whiskey in there.
What is wrong with you? Okay. The other game, which unfortunately I can't be as positive about, is 11. So in this game... from Portal Games, you are the manager of a football team, and I think that's fascinating. I'm not a huge sports guy, but I like the idea of being the manager in sports. I've always enjoyed that concept. It's like a business, but it's an interesting business where you have players and things like that. And this game is very much like that. You are collecting cards and you're collecting players and staff and making your stadium better. And then you play the soccer game part of it, and that feels incredibly random and boring. And it just brings the whole game down. Like, I buy this guy, this guy, this guy. All right, let's flip a card and see how the soccer match turned out. And it doesn't do that part in an interesting way. And it's a pretty bit hefty game. There's a ton of stuff going on, and that kind of makes it less interesting for me.
But I like the box design where you can put your head on top of it and look like that's your body. Yeah, like that.
Is that what it's supposed to be? Is that the reason they did that?
I think so. You are part of the game.
That's a little off. Tell me when it's right.
There you go.
Is that good? No, it's still a little thin.
Perfect.
I'm glad we've done this. All right. Thank you, Eric. All right. Thank you, Julie, so much.
This has been a blast. I have really enjoyed talking with you. If folks want to know more about you, what your projects are, read some of your writing, where can they find out more?
So Van Ryder Games, Van R-Y-D-E-R Games. We're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And we're putting out a newsletter next week where we have a really big announcement for our next upcoming game that will be released at Essen. That's coming out next week. So if you want to hear about that, go sign up for our newsletter.
Cool.
All right. Well, check it out. And those books, get those books. I'm excited about those new kids' books, the graphic novels, and more. The summer is coming. It is game high season here, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And we'll see you soon at the table.
Thank you for joining us today. At the Table is produced by Tom and me with assistance from Roy Kennedy, Wendy Yee, and Chris Yee. The portal through which you escape from shenanigans, brought to you by Door from Antics. Our theme is written by Timothy Pinkham, arranged by Dave Culling, and support for everything at the Dice Tower comes from viewers and listeners like you. Reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter, or to Tom at Dicetower.com or Eric at Dicetower.com. Until we see you again from all of us at the table, have fun,
Have fun
gaming.